one.
Well, reasons, greetings, you good people. Yes, it is reason during the season as Peikoff Wednesdays takes over the Daily Objective. Well, just for today, thank you for joining us. Now, if you're listening live on YouTube, we want to see you in the chat. Chime in. And since it is the giving season, please consider supporting the Ayn Rand Center UK by clicking the dollar sign. Whoop, I hit my mute there. Hit that dollar sign at the bottom. Now, if you're in Europe, it may be a pound sign, it may be a euro sign, but hit that super chat icon and highlight your question or comment with a super chat. You know, doesn't your witty comment or question deserve to be highlighted in that manner? Yes, it does. Now, if you're listening afterward, you can do the same with YouTube's super thanks feature, and your hard-earned money will support the hard work of the professionals at the Ayn Rand Center UK. Now, every Wednesday, I have the honor and pleasure of joining the renowned author of Creating Christ and The Passion of Ayn Rand's Critics, an expert on all things objectivism, James Valliant. All-around good guy. James, how are you doing on this fine Wednesday, 11 days before Santa's big day?
I gotta say, I'm totally getting into the Christmas spirit. Merry Christmas, Robert, and Merry Christmas to everyone first of all, at the Ayn Rand Center UK, starting with Rosie and Daniel, who make all of our efforts possible, and especially to the contributors. As you say, they really make this all possible, and I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart. And it is just a wonderful time to think about giving and to think about becoming a subscriber. It's not just a gift. You're getting value for value here. But if these in general are your long-term values, this is the time, this is the moment. Please be generous and open your minds and your hearts to the Ayn Rand Center UK.
It's all a good cause. Now, Ayn Rand's philosophy, objectivism, in today's culture of irrationalism and pragmatism and statism, and especially altruism, sacrifice, objectivism is a new, radical, rational philosophy. And so, James, we regularly address controversial topics guided by the wisdom of Ayn Rand and the brilliance of Leonard Peikoff, and today is no exception. I did try to work in, the Twitter files and Kanye into the Christmas theme,
Bit of a stretch.
if I could get Rucka Ali's help, I could do Kanye got run over by Musk's reindeer, walking home from Trump's house Christmas Eve. And there is a Christmas connection, since looking at the Daily Objective YouTube counts, the recent episodes which featured those two topics, Kanye and Twitter, have the most views. So, and this is the same thing for Yaron Brooks shows. So Kanye and Twitter are the gifts that keep on giving. But with just, it's amazing. But with just 11 days until Christmas, there are more urgent and more cheerful matters to be discussed today. Dr. Peikoff has addressed the Christmas holiday and tradition several times, most famously in his essay and presentation, Christmas Should Be More Commercial, and during his radio show and his podcasts. And I've linked to that material is out there on the internet. I've linked to it on my socials, facebook.com/Robert Nasir, twitter.com/Robert Nasir. You can listen to those after you get done listening to this, but I want to start with a podcast answer. And James, you sent this to me. Leonard Peikoff included in his volume, Keeping It Real and Bringing Ideas Down to Earth. Dr. Peikoff answers this question. You get ready for the controversy here.
Yeah.
Is it proper to teach young children to believe in Santa? Now, I have strong feelings on this topic. I don't know if I have good thoughts on it, but I have strong feelings about
it. Well, it's a good place to start our introspection. I try and identify what those feelings, what the evaluations are behind those feelings. And it is a controversial topic. I've had a lot of most of my objectivist friends have children or have raised children. And I can tell you there's a wide range of approaches that they've taken. So this is one of those issues upon which I think reasonable objectivists can have at least a degree of difference of opinion on. There's a wide range of options here. But if you think about it, Santa Claus is a mythological figure, the way he's come to be understood. He's not real. There's no workshop at the North Pole, I suspect. And so is it, as objectivists, we would never dream of teaching our kids that God was real. We would never dream of teaching our kids some other mystical fantasy was real and get them to distrust their reason in that way. So is it okay to raise a child, a small child, but with the quote belief, and that may be a flexible idea here, with the belief in Santa Claus? And there's been a variety of different opinions objectivist parents have taken on this position.
They have, they have. And for me, it's going to come down to, well, what belief means in this context. As you suggest, there's a whole issue there. And also, to me, it seems to have something to do with the temperament of the children. But let me start with what Leonard Peikoff had to say, because Leonard Peikoff was asked, is it proper to teach young children to believe in Santa? And he said, well, I wouldn't teach them. I wouldn't say, well, let's have a lesson. There's this guy up at the North Pole and so on. Nor would I invent anything along the lines of, well, you know, Santa has a sister who comes out in April. And he says, personally, the way I treated Santa Claus when my daughter was a child was just to smile. I didn't deny anything. I just treated it as fun, the fun it is. That's all. And as though it were an animated fairy tale, which is really what it is. And that is the way kids take it. They take it as a fairy story come to life. And that's why you will find young kids are crushed if they lose a parent or a pet, but they are not crushed when they find out there is no Santa. Even though they may have loved him and looked forward to him, they realize in some part of this that it's a game, that this is a story they're living through. When I brought up my daughter, I played Santa Claus to the hilt, as well as the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. She was always fascinated, and we had fun. I even bought, I love this, I even bought time for Santa to personally come to the house and visit her. It was pretty expensive. I think he came for 10 minutes. She was all excited, and there was never a negative, no anti-rational effect at all, unquote. So saith Leonard Peikoff. So we know not only that Leonard Peikoff is a model for all of us in many ways, but also we know enough about Kira Peikoff, the author and advocate, brilliant and charming. And it's hard to imagine that there was any point in her life where she said, oh, Dad, you did the wrong thing, and I was so hurt and disillusioned. No, apparently it came out exactly as Leonard Peikoff says. And that's why I say I think temperament's part of the issue, and the way that you handle what that belief is part of the issue. Some children aren't crushed at all, but I have known and spoken to, and to some degree was one of those kids who, oh my God, my parents were lying to me all this time.
See, is that the way you perceived it, that you had been lied to by your parents?
Well, who hadn't? Unless you made it clear from the start that it was a game.
See, the way Leonard Peikoff describes it is that he's not creating a specific factual narrative behind Santa or making a specific teaching. He didn't deny, he just smiled, indicating that I'm not, if he'd given out, no, well, of course, Santa's there, and then this big narrative story about who Santa was, that would create, I think, a real specific lie. If he's just smiling and winking, in effect, to her belief, he's allowing her to believe it. And the stories and the mythology, as he indicates by implication, that surround Santa Claus sort of make him a fantasy cartoon figure. This is true. He is a figure of child fantasy and child stories. We don't worry, for example, when we tell fairy tales to kids that they're going to mistake this for the truth. If I tell a kid, something from Grimm's fairy tales, some of those are weird and violent, but if I tell them one of Aesop's fables or something, they don't pretend for any 5 minutes that Brer Rabbit is talking in the Aesop's fable or whatever, what they updated versions of it either. What they understand that it's a story, and it takes a while for a child even to get to the point where they can distinguish fantasy from reality fully in their head, and I think that's probably the critical moment there. As for myself, I had older siblings. And so I never really had the belief in, they relished. They were just a few years older than me. So they were young kids who just relished the opportunity of just, there's no Santa, Jimmy.
Crush the illusions every time they could.
Exactly. That's what little brothers are for. So I never really believed in Santa Claus. I knew it was the love and generosity of my parents. But they continued to play the game with me, knowing I knew better. And I think to some degree, that's what Leonard is talking about here. He's talking about, yeah, a wink and a smile, and let's play this little game. And if it's perceived that way, then when they get to the point where they can distinguish fantasy from reality, they'll have all the tools they need to know, oh, Dad wasn't lying to me. But Leonard Peikoff was an outstanding parent, and the results show it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some kids just know how to take it, and some kids don't. And I think you've got to kind of be sensitive to that as a parent. And one undoubtedly saving grace was that it was of a kin with Easter bunnies and tooth fairies, and it kind of sets the right tone, I think.
Right, like a kid's fairy tale. And so long as it's kept in that realm, that fairy tale realm, then it's no more than a story, a children's story. You know, when you read Dr. Seuss to a kid, people don't believe in the Grinch. They don't believe in the Who's and Whoville. The kids realize that this is an abstraction, and at the point when they can distinguish fantasy from reality. So in that sense, if you approach it that way, I see no harm.
Good. Well, let me say real quick, thank you to Michael Sweet, who says, I've been waiting for an episode like this to start. If it sounds like I was singing Foreigners, I've been waiting for a girl like you, only because he put the musical notes in there. But thank you for the $2 super chat there.
I've been waiting.
And Jonathan Honig is in as well with $4.99. Jonathan, it is good to know that you are out there taking it too. Very much appreciated. Again, Christmas is 11 days away. Feel free to bring more of those super chats on. No more than say that. And Allie Beard right away is in with $2 and says, I enjoy Grimm's fairy tales and Aesop's fables. Excellent. Well, great literature for children, great literature for us all. Most of the moral lessons in those books are fantastic. A few of them are fantastic in the Peikovian sense, as being fantasy, but mostly good. And Kim Aviles, I believe it's Aviles, Kim Aviles is in for $9.99. Very generous. Thank you. And says, thank you. Merry Christmas. Well, Kim, Merry Christmas right back at you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Michael for $2 again says, well, Dr. P didn't reinforce the idea as an absolute. Yes, Michael, I think that's right. And what James is pointing out as well, he did not go overboard with this. It was a game. It was a children's game.
Right.
I'm probably a little more,
no, I think,
I'm more in the middle of being explicit about it being a fairy tale. Like Halloween, we dress up and we don't assume anybody's really Dracula. But
right. But I agree with your basic point. We never want to lie to our children. We never want them to believe in a supernatural dimension or that magic is real. And insofar as there's an implication that magic is real, and you know what I mean, or that you could just believe whatever the heck you want, and if the child gets to the point where they distrust the parent because, gee, I've been lied to, it could affect their trust issues and intimacy issues for the rest of their life if they feel lied to. So I would feel very strongly about your value there. Don't lie to kids.
Right. And that would take us into your book, Creating Christ, but we'll hold off on that for now.
Yes. But you see, we objectivists, we love Christmas. That's the thing. We love the benevolence and the gift giving and the lights and the ceremony. Ayn Rand described it as a wonderful excuse to throw parties and exchange presents. Now that says everything about Ayn Rand's benevolence that you're right. She's looking for excuses to throw parties and exchange presents. What a wonderfully benevolent position. And that's as objectivists and lovers of life, as egoists seeking the most out of life. That is the kind of opportunity that we're looking for. And to have an institution like this, like Christmas, it transcends. And it was wonderful about Santa as he sort of supplants the original Christian meaning, the birth of Jesus, in most kids' imaginations. And so on balance, I love Christmas. I love the lights, I love the music, I love everything about it. You know, I recently discovered what I really like about so much Christmas music. It combines joy, happiness with the solemn and the sacred. Very rarely in art do those two things come together so powerfully as they do in Christmas music. I understand that there's a religious source for that, but that emotional combination of solemnity and joy, I find particularly moving. And so I love a lot of Christmas music. I love the Christmas lights. I love the decorations. I love the smile. I love the excitement of children when I see out and about. Everything about it I love.
Yes, yes. It makes me think of Dagny Taggart asking, "We never had to take it all any of it seriously, did we?" Which is one of the most serious lines in the book. Talk about the combination of the light and the sacred.
Indeed.
So good. Now,
Right.
Allie Beard is in with the super chat too, another $2, and says, "What is y'all's go-to Christmas movie each year?" Ooh, I may, if we have time at the end, I'd love to talk about It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And whether that is an epic of catastrophic altruism or maybe a little of something else.
Well, I would say Christmas Carol is the famous Dickens story, is
Yes.
in some ways can be looked at as a mixed bag, right? Ebenezer Scrooge is sort of being denounced for being, a good businessman almost, it seems. But of course, that's not the full picture. Right. He is also not a benevolent man. And so he bought into a sort of a false alternative. So Dickens is mushing things together in a package deal. Christian altruism combined with this man's own psychological need for benevolence and human relationships, which he's denied himself all his life, the human aspect of his life. So the reform of Ebenezer Scrooge, say, is a wonderful moment because we see the man's psychological liberation from his past malevolence, in other words, through it. Now, what is my go-to movie? There's a lot of movie versions of that. It's a Wonderful Life for sure. I love the children's stuff. I really do. They made so many wonderful children's things for Christmas. I include in this the classic Christmas Story with Darren McGavin, and just a wonderful story telling how American Christmases go down and how it was an important part of this kid's childhood, as it was for a lot of American kids. And that's just a classic movie in my view. But I think you're right. It's a Wonderful Life gets to deeper philosophical issues that I can rah.
Yeah,
Even
just like a Christmas Carol. It really depends on how you take it and which adaptation you see. Amy and I recently, we saw a live version on stage of A Christmas Carol. Beautiful sets, good actors, magnificent staging. There was music in it. The music was beautiful, but the adaptation was horrible. And the very worst things about Scrooge are what they brought out.
And I'll give you another one. There's a Cary Grant, David Niven, Loretta Young movie, The Bishop's Wife. And it's about a clergyman and it's about Christmas. And Cary Grant plays an angel who comes in response to the bishop's prayer. Now, given that mystical context, I still think that the message is wonderful. You see, I won't spoil it too much for people, but it's about loving life on earth at the end of the day.
Yes.
Making life here on earth joyful.
Incidentally, for fans of A Christmas Carol, I don't think you can beat George C. Scott, 1984.
Oh, you're right.
It's even available on YouTube, and it gets me every single time.
Absolutely. My favorite version of Christmas Carol is George C. Scott's too.
And I would say that version is downright pro-capitalist. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Actually, they do emphasize things in just the right way for that, apart from it being brilliantly acted.
Yeah. Including the joy of the successful businessman Fezziwig, who knows why he pushes his people to be successful. And
isn't that wonderful? And he remembers Fezziwig, and he sort of restores that when he gets reformed. Most people know the story of Christmas Carol. Yeah, and he comes out enthusiastic at the end. The enthusiasm of Scrooge at the end to be benevolent and make up for his previous malevolence is just, you're right, brings tears to your eyes.
So good. And there are more, but here's another question Dr. Peikoff has asked.
Yeah.
This whole Santa Claus thing. Is Santa Claus an altruist? Now, I don't think this one actually made the book that the podcasts were compiled into, but maybe because by this time, I think most of us know. Leonard Peikoff answered, no, Santa Claus, well, he's a symbol. He's simply a symbol of the fact that you get a reward if you deserve it when you're young. And notice the very anti-Christian nature of Santa Claus. As the song goes, be good for goodness sake. If you're not good, well, you won't get a present. He makes a clear distinction between good children and bad ones.
Santa makes a list and he checks it twice. He's going to find out who's been naughty and nice. we've been told this explicitly in songs and cartoons. And the American legend of Santa is that he rewards good children. And in fact, it has its roots in the Dutch ceremony, this why we stuff stockings, why we put presents for children in stockings by the fireplace. Well, one of the chores children had in Old Holland was to dry and warm the socks by the fireplace. This was a year-long, especially in the winter, important, obviously, a winter chore of the kids. And if they were doing their chores, you see, then their stockings would be, and if they were nice and clean, they'd done their chore properly, cleaning and drying the stockings, then they would be rewarded. So there's a definite justice element. Santa is not an indiscriminate giver. And this is a big distinction between an altruist and a benevolent person. A benevolent person is not going to be just give it out and not care that, Adolf Hitler is getting a Christmas present just as much as Howard Roark is. If I can use our opposite.
Mercy, and have mercy no matter what.
Exactly. It's not about mercy. It's not about sacrifice. But it is about the positive rewards that come from virtue. And Santa Claus's whole benevolent image is, okay, he does have a naughty nice list. He's a little generous, perhaps. They are kids, after all. But the mere fact that he has a naughty nice list tells you Santa's no altruist. He's a believer in justice.
Yes. Yeah, we've pointed out before, and I do this on my show a lot too, the Thursday show, is that Leonard Peikoff, justice is not primarily about punishing the evil. That's important. It's even essential. But justice, first and foremost, is for recognizing and praising the good. And talk about Santa Claus. There you go.
Exactly. It's a reward for being a virtuous kid. What a wonderful myth that is, huh?
Yeah, and it's kind of very Howard Roark. We had the earlier traditions with Krampus, who would punish the bad children. Santa doesn't punish the bad children. He just says, nothing for you. Here's a lump of coal, so I didn't just forget you. But he doesn't really punish the children. He just said, you don't matter until you do good things. And I love that aspect of it too. It's very, but I don't think of you.
Oh, and my parents were totally into that. Have you been a good boy this year? I'd say, because Christmas is approaching and I'm 5 years old, geez, what's Santa going to bring? And I kind of know it's my siblings ruined it for me. So I'm asking Mom, what is Santa going to bring this year? And her response to me, or Dad's response to me, was, well, have you been a good kid this year? I want you to consider.
It makes me think of the Dowager asking Francisco in Atlas Shrugged, tell me, Senor Francisco, just what do you think is what's going to happen to the world? And Francisco says, it's going to get exactly what it deserves.
And her response, how cruel.
How cruel of you. Yes.
Right.
I don't want a Santa Claus like Jesus.
Right. Justice is cruel.
Yes. Yes. But we talked earlier about the amazing thing about Santa Claus is he's kind. And he's just. And not everybody recognizes that there's nothing kinder than actually giving people what they deserve. And sometimes that means punishment. But what would be more kind than giving somebody everything they deserve? It's the greatest compliment I give to friends of mine, at least the ones who deserve it, is that one of these days you're going to get what you deserve. And it's really the best compliment you can pay somebody.
It is.
All of your hard work, all of your virtue is going to pay off. And other things being equal, that is what happens.
Yeah.
And Santa represents that. I love from the essay, Christmas Should Be More Commercial, he gives a kind of a quick version of what he did on his radio show. And he says, Santa Claus is a thoroughly American invention. There was a St. Nicholas long ago and a feeble holiday connected with him on December 5th. But in 1822, an American named Clement Clark Moore wrote a poem about a visit from St. Nick. It was Moore and a few other New Yorkers who invented St. Nick's physical appearance and personality, came up with the idea that Santa travels on Christmas Eve in a sleigh pulled by reindeer, comes down a chimney, stuffs toys in the kids' stockings, and then goes back to the North Pole. And he goes on to say, of course, the Puritans denounced Santa as the Antichrist because he pushed Jesus into the background.
Oh, absolutely. Those pilgrims who came to Plymouth Rock absolutely opposed anything like Christmas celebrations. To them, that was just anathema. No, Puritans were anti-Christmas. And when in the early 19th century, American poets, and it is that poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, that basically shaped the American myth of Santa Claus, at least the North American version of Santa Claus. It was such a popular poem. And others, in particular retailers in New York City. And in fact, the entire role of commerce in the development of the Santa myth. Take Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He began as an ad. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer began as a commercial for another product. And then they wrote a song, and then the song became a cartoon, and then it developed completely from a commercial ad from a New York retailer. And when you think about that, the details of the whole Christmas mythology in America are the product of poets and retailers. That's the truth.
Yes. Yeah. Ayn Rand was asked about Christmas, and she pointed that out.
Yeah, the real Saint Nicholas was a real not very nice guy. He persecuted heretics and was kind of a vicious, like an early Christian saint, you might imagine. He had all the benevolence of an early Christian saint, which means he was a monster. But fortunately, they transformed Saint Nicholas into something very positive as the years went by, particularly in America. Yeah.
Yeah. I love when Ayn Rand was asked, should atheists celebrate Christmas? And she said, the secular meaning of the Christmas holiday is wider than the tenets of any particular religion. It is goodwill toward men, a frame of mind which is not the exclusive property, though it's supposed to be a part, but is a largely unobserved part of the Christian religion. The charming aspect of Christmas is the fact that it expresses goodwill in a cheerful, happy, benevolent, non-sacrificial way. One says, Merry Christmas, not weep and repent.
Weep and repent.
Yeah. And the goodwill is expressed in a material, earthly form by giving presents to one's friends or by sending them cards in token of remembrance. I love when Ayn Rand talks about holidays like Christmas, and you feel the joy, the benevolence come out in ways that,
like I say, she called it an excuse for exchanging presents and giving parties. Yeah. It's when you think about it, it is the opposite of altruism in that sense, because what it is it's a celebration of material values and life on earth and the possibility of joy. A lot of people get sad and depressed in wintertime. But the fact of the matter is that we pick that time, this cold time, to say, no, this is when we're going to have a warming celebration. This is when we're going to get together and share warm drinks and a party around a fire. It's a positive thing, no doubt about it. Perfectly consistent. That kind of expression is consistent with Americanism, not really Christianity. Now, it's true that the story that we're told, that the reason why children get presents on Christmas is, of course, goes back to the story of Jesus in the Bible, the three wise men. Matthew doesn't specify how many wise men. He just says wise men from the Magi from the East brought these presents to Jesus, the baby Jesus. And this is thought to be the anchor there. But that's not true. The Romans had a pagan holiday named Saturnalia, which happened in December. And it was a time where children were emphasized. The world was kind of turned upside down, and slaves, it was a terrible slave society, but slaves and children were given special liberties and special celebrations. It was a time for exchanging gifts and throwing parties. That aspect of it was actually pagan before it was Christian, and was just taken over by Christians.
Yes. Yeah, we had discussed a question earlier. Someone had asked Dr. Peikoff, what should one do if asked to be a bridesmaid in a wedding, but feels uncomfortable with the religious aspects of this honor? And it's good to revisit this question because some folks are asking the same thing about, well, I've got friends who go to church for the holidays.
Right.
Should I accompany them if they ask me to come along? Should I participate in religious Christmas carols? Yeah,
you go, you visit your family, you through the woods to grandma's house we go, and grandma wants to go to church. Is it okay, I would say in this context, to go with grandma to church for the Christmas service at church? And what are you doing there? Now, I would say it's true, you don't want to endorse the religious ceremony. On the other hand, if it is this once a year thing, and you're going there, and now get this, I have to admit this. Some of the songs, I admitted this earlier about Christmas music, but some of the music and some of the ceremonies, and for Christmas, churches, many churches, very big churches, will get in good music performers. So you'll have just independent reason to go there to listen to good musicians perform solid music. If that's your reason for going to church, to see the aesthetics of the ceremony and to hear this music and to be with your family, it seems to me perfectly okay to one time out of the year to go with grandma to church. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody in that church is assuming that just because you are there,
right,
you are supporting what's going on there in terms of the larger religious.
Well, now, if you were to say hallelujah, praise God, and stand up and you could sanction it in that context, I suppose. But my general rule would be there's nothing wrong with participating in a ceremony with people you love, even if it has a religious element, so long as you yourself are going there with a secular purpose.
Right. Leonard Peikoff had answered that question. As I gather from your question, you have no problem with your friend's husband or with her getting married to him, and you have no problem with her being religious, because otherwise you wouldn't be a friend and religion wouldn't come up. If that's true, I don't see any problem with your participation in a religious setting. I don't see that as your sanction of a religion. If on some occasion, which can have an obvious secular base, you follow the rites for an hour or two, you are not helping to spread religion. The people there know perfectly well that all different religions and no religions come to these things. So I think that's pretty clear.
I've been to synagogues and Southern Baptist church. Boy, talk about great music and an exciting ceremony. I've been to Southern Baptist without sanctioning any of them. I'm an atheist, and people know when I go that I'm doing it basically just for research or aesthetic purposes or something. You're an intrinsicist if you think that an objectivist can't step through the front door of a religious institution. That's total intrinsicism. That's a religious way of thinking, actually. If you have a secular purpose, whether it's research or the aesthetics behind it, or what I was just saying here about Christmas, there's nothing wrong with it. Or a wedding ceremony, nothing wrong with it. Don't be a religious intrinsicist about religious ceremonies.
Yes.
Ceremony and symbolism play an important part psychologically in humans, I believe. It's connected to Ayn Rand's, theory of art, in fact. So I don't knock ceremony or symbolism as such. And much of the symbolism of Christmas is purely benevolent.
Good. Now, one place I would draw the line, if they pass me the collection plate, I would simply smile graciously and pass it to the next person. And the reason is because I want any contributions I have to go to the Ayn Rand Center UK. If y'all aren't a member yet, go to aynrandcenter.co.uk, click membership, sign up. You can support the ARC UK with a painless and small contribution every month. Similarly, you can join the Ayn Rand Center UK YouTube channel, and the fee on that is even less per month, but it gets you access on YouTube to some of the events that are members only. So you can watch a YouTube stream of the Ayn Rand Fiction Club, of the weekend study groups, other events that are going on. So 2 different ways to support the ARC UK, but also keep those super chats coming in. They are very much appreciated. They keep the lights on at ARC UK Towers, the skyscraper in London that I've never been there, but I'm sure it's there, and I'm sure it's beautiful. On a related note, a friend had posted when I first announced the topic of the show, I said, come on, Santa Claus isn't real. And after I got done gasping and picked my jaw up off the floor, I said, well, he's as real as Odysseus, as real as Cyrano de Bergerac, as real as Atticus Finch, as real as Howard Roark.
Right. And the image of Howard Roark is a symbol in my mind. And in fact, he's more than just a symbol. He's actually this fleshed out character, but he's a perfectly fictional character, and I can consider him. And now I don't believe that there was actually a Howard Roark, and nor does any novelist expect their reader to believe that this is real. And so the whole Santa Claus thing, again, there's a literature, just as there's a literature behind Cyrano and Howard Roark. There's a literature, you mentioned the famous poem that basically got the American legend of Santa started. There's a literature behind that Now, if you read the poem itself, it is obviously set in this fantasy world. It is not meant to be taken literally. The poem itself is not meant to be taken literally. It's fiction. It's a fictional poem story. So while it is true there is no real Santa Claus, Santa can be a symbol, an important symbol for something, an archetype that emerges even from literature. And that's how I would, quote, believe in Santa.
Yes. And, there are elements of Howard Roark in people I know. There are massive elements of Howard Roark in Ayn Rand or Leonard Peikoff. Howard Roark is real. He's just a pastiche of moral principles and elements of life and exciting concretes in life, including love of architecture, love of nature, love of people. And the same thing is true with Santa Claus. As we describe what the nature of and what his virtues are, what we love about Santa Claus, we realize that, well, we see that in the world. Whether we actually ever see a guy in a red suit who embodies all of that. Incidentally, the last Santa Claus I spoke to embodied all of it. He was so good at the Henry Ford Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan.
They had a good Santa at Henry Ford.
But, what is more real to you? Some random news story you see about the latest thing that Ye said to Don, is that real to you? Or is it more real when you hear "'Twas the night before Christmas"? When all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that St. Nicholas would soon be there. When I hear that, that is as real to me as half of the nonsense that I read when I scour the Google News.
Right. Yeah. It's got a great,
probably more accurate.
And it's probably got a greater basis in reality. Yes. Now, Robert, but it's true. You make a point. What's more real to me? Not the literal facts of Howard Roark or Santa Claus, but what they stand for, very real to me.
Yes. And if I could just return real quick, because Ali had asked about movies, I kind of just want to put my 2 cents in, my 10 cents in, my gold dollar coin in on that question of It's a Wonderful Life, because George Bailey in that film, and if you don't know the film, you've got to see the film, even if you decide you're one of those people who will love it or you will hate it. George Bailey is a man who gave up his most passionately held ambitions. He wanted to travel. He wanted to study abroad. He wanted a life of excitement, and he gave it all up in the name of altruism. He sacrificed himself to small town values and the needs and expectations of his family and his friends. Wikipedia says, George Bailey is a man who has given up his personal dreams in order to help others in his community. Now, that's all true. And so I totally understand when Yaron Brook or Harry Binswanger talks about It's a Wonderful Life. And if that's what puts the lump in your throat when you watch that film, that's you need to do some introspection. Mm-hmm. You really do. But alternately, he can be seen, and think about this if you've seen the film, as a man who takes action and substantial risks in the name of his values. Saving the lives and the futures of people he really cares about, like his brother, or the pharmacist who's going to be put away for life for that mistake he makes. He takes over the family business rather than letting it be run into the ground by a corrupt and contemptible businessman. Henry Potter, the man who finds the money and keeps it and doesn't say anything. He and Mary are wed, and then there's a run on the bank, and he gives up his honeymoon savings. He wanted, at least he could take that honeymoon trip since he didn't get to travel. But he gives that up to keep the business afloat. Well, that's because he cares more about the business running than going on a honeymoon. Is that a sacrifice?
Yeah, he gives this, it looks like he may be an altruist. I'm not quite sure he really is, because in a sense, the life of adventure that he was talking about, and he explains to Mary early in the film, is a dream, but it's a detached dream. Whereas when he's confronted with the reality of what's happening in his own hometown and his father's business, he got to come in and he's got to, no, wait a minute here. This is what's important to me. This is my value, and includes Mary. And by the time he's done, he realizes all the selfish values that he was actually working for through all that time, that Yaron Brook properly points out. Yeah, it's stated in an altruistic way. And it wouldn't have been, the same thing if it hadn't, appealed to Christian, if it didn't have that. But what's wonderful is that, again, it's like Ebenezer Scrooge in the sense that he realizes, hey, wait a minute, I was creating all these positive values for me by the end. I have Mary, I have the kids, I've saved these for my friends, I saved my brother's life. I'm, the title is wonderful. It's a wonderful life by pursuing what was the value at the time that was most important. That's the way I'd interpret it. By pursuing his highest value at the time, it seemed like he was just giving up happiness. And so in his own mind, what did I give this all up for? And he comes to realize, no, these were important long-term values that I was actually supporting the whole time. And it turns out he's the richest man in town, as his brother put it. And that's the line that always gets me.
The richest man in town, the very end of the movie.
That's a terrible spoiler alert, I know. But the point is that by the end of the movie, it's not the altruism. It's the feedback. It's the reward he got for his virtue. Yes. It's the finding that these were the values.
Yeah, that's how I describe it, is that in the end, and in justice, the people of the town for whom Bailey had been such a benefactor, they raised the money to cover the missing money, and they saved the business. And George Bailey is rightly seen as a good man, as a hero to whom they all owe their gratitude. So there is justice in the end of the film. It's just kind of the patience of Job to get there.
And it makes Christmas, again, American Christmas, a kind of reward for virtue.Makes sense? And even the mystical element has a symbolic reward for virtue for the angel. And in that sense, it's not malevolent altruism at all, but take inventory of the values you have pursued and that you have achieved. And it's reminding us not to lose sight of that. And maybe at the end of the year, when Christmas and New Year's celebrations come up, it's a good time to reflect back on our values and how we've achieved them.
Yes. Yeah, it seems a little silly, the angel, but how many of these Christmas stories have angels? And the angel seems a little bumbling, and you aren't sure he's going to earn his wings, but he comes up with the clever idea of showing George Bailey the alternate timeline. So he does earn his wings.
He does earn his wings.
Yeah.
See, and I don't mind a mystical element to a story if it's a fictional story.
Yes.
Tolkien's, there's no elves and dwarves and hobbits around, but we can see them as allegories for what Tolkien may not have agreed, but we can see them as allegories for a wider statement about benevolence and getting along with different people. So
it's interesting. I see this a lot in our culture the way it is, where I can see why some people regard the altruistic aspects of a film like that as more important because of how much we've got to fight out there. Whereas I think in a better world, it would be easier to say, yeah, that's not good. But
you want me to say a movie that I really object to because I can't find something a good message in?
Yes. What would be an example of that?
Miracle on 34th Street. In a way, it's a charming story, and it's easy to get sucked into the story. But the lesson is an anti-reason one.
Yes.
The little girl who's skeptical, played by Natalie Wood, right, is skeptical about Santa and comes to believe that Santa is real.
She has good reason to be skeptical.
She has good reason to be skeptical, and then mystical, magical things happen through the course of the thing, which gets this clever, skeptical girl to find, okay, I relent. I'll believe in magic. I'll believe in the irrational. Now, do I object to every aesthetic element in that? Are there charming moments in that?
Very well made.
Very well made film, but at the end of the day, the plot theme is a mystical one.
Well, except now it sounds like you're starting to think maybe parents shouldn't tell their kids Santa's real. Again, I think it's all in how it's handled,
too, right? The mother of the little girl is skeptical too, and encourages her daughter's skepticism. She too has to learn that magic and mysticism are correct, and that that's maybe the real Santa Claus. See,
yes.
People probably know the story. She works for Macy's, and she's scheduling out the Macy's Christmas Day parade, that happens on Thanksgiving. And she's got her Santa Claus, and she knows he's just a Santa Claus, and the old Santa Claus is drunk, and so she has to pick this other Santa Claus who looks just like Santa Claus, but he turns out to be the real Santa Claus.
Yeah.
And he has to convince her and her daughter that he is the real Santa. And that's really the story. So at the end of the day, it's a mystic theme.
And even when the truth comes out, the message is there's something more important than truth.
Right.
There's something more important than the reality here.
Right.
Yeah, I totally get that. I'd actually never seen that film until maybe 2 years ago. And the missus and I decided to watch it. And yeah, you keep wanting at some point for, well, let everybody know what's really going on. And yeah, then you can create metaphors and paint it in a way that's hopeful and charming, but don't keep the hoax going forever, which again goes back to where we started this episode.
Right.
Yes, reality comes first. And
you see, I'd contrast that with the one I mentioned earlier, the bishop's wife. It too is mystical. There's an angel and it's Christmas and all that. It's a bishop but the theme is about loving this world. It's about cherishing romantic love. It's about loving your child. It's about being benevolent in the world and being positive in the world. So it's a totally different thing because the theme is secular. It's about earthly happiness, as opposed to, no, really believe in Santa Claus.
Yes.
Makes sense?
It does. And again, I would be the first one to fight for Santa Claus. I am all for Santa Claus, and I am too. For all of our other heroes throughout history who may not be metaphysical, but they are metaphorical, and they are as important and maybe more important than a lot of people who have actually lived.
Indeed.
And one more super chat comes in. Allie is asking the perennial question. I probably don't even have to tell you what it is, and you will know, but is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Yes.
Yes, I agree.
Totally, yes.
It comes back to that issue of psychology and temperament, but if you've really got Christmas spirit and you appreciate Bruce Willis when he was at his prime, oh my God, yes, it's a Christmas movie.
See, if you view the villain as sort of a Grinch,
yeah,
and he's opposed to commerce.
Although
it is a defense of the Nakatomi business, and it's law enforcement and justice. And so, while it is more of the negative side of justice, as opposed to the positive side of justice of Christmas, it does have a justice element, and it is non-accidentally set at Christmas for that reason.
Yes. And as action movies go, it's about as good as it gets, too.
Yes, but I just like it as an action movie, too.
It's absolutely true that it's not really Christmas until Hans Gruber falls from the Nakatomi.
Yes, very much a Christmas movie, yes.
Yes. Well, James, I'm looking forward to Christmas, and having this discussion with you has me doing so even more. Now, Ayn Rand Center UK. Any more super chats, get them in at the last minute because Christmas is right around the corner, but also right around the corner. Upcoming shows at 10 o'clock p.m. UK time, Cutting Edge with Lee Pearson, Bob Stubblefield, Steve Richens, and Shoshana Milgram is going to be on today talking about thinking in the Fountainhead, Howard Roark and the Heroic Mind. That is when I saw the ads for that earlier, and I am really looking forward to that.
Howard Roark, the Thinker. What a group, what a panel today. You guys shouldn't miss that one. I know I'm not going to miss it.
No, it's going to be good because on first glance, Howard Roark seems like he doesn't have to think about thinking. He's already the perfect man. But no, there's so much substance there. This is going to be a great conversation. So yeah, that's 10 o'clock UK time, 5 o'clock my time, 2 o'clock your time, wherever in the world you are. But yeah, the Cutting Edge with Lee Pearson is always good. And this one, including Shoshana Milgram as a guest, that's going to be awesome. Oh, direct link to the video just got posted in the chat. Excellent. Thank you for that to the producer, James. A great discussion. And I know that you are looking forward to a Merry Christmas. And from here in Southeast Michigan to you on the left coast, we wish you all the best. And also to the chatters out there, the super chatters, thank you for that. Everybody who supports the Ayn Rand Center UK in any way, and folks who are just listeners and are enjoying the discussions. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all. Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year.
We wish you a Merry Christmas.